Hi everybody, and welcome to a very exciting webinar. Today, Power Retail and Hub bring you the advantages of pickup, drop-off for e-commerce. As we know, fulfillment is a massive strategy talking point for all retailers of all sizes, especially at this time of the year. And I'm really looking forward to getting into this today. By way of introduction, my name is Natasha Scholl and I'm the Insights Editor at Power Retail. I am joined today by our esteemed panel, some would say the royalty of fulfillment and delivery. We have today Matthew Musamechi, who is the GM Network Operations for Seiko Logistics, Australia and New Zealand. Also Richard Tame, who is the CEO of Couriers Please Australia. Chris Weaver, who is the Chief Commercial Officer at ShipIt. And Marie Griffith, Head of Shipping at eBay Australia and New Zealand. And of course, we have the esteemed David McLean, who is the founder and CEO of Hub. I'm going to throw to David now, who's going to run this and ask some fascinating questions from our fantastic panel.
Thanks very much, Natasha. And I'm really delighted to be here today with some great people who I know have some key answers to some topics that we'd like to go through. So we really want to spend today talking about home delivery, sustainability and the challenges around that, some of the concerns people have around security of parcels and technology. And what I'd love to do is sort of jump straight in with one of the biggest questions. So Richard Thain, CEO of Couriers Please, very simple question for you. What are the major challenges around home delivery?
Thanks, David. Great to be here, and pleased that you started with an easy question for us. Let me start by saying, I guess, I'll challenge Natasha's comment about us being the royalty of online delivery. I think at the moment we're all students, and I say that because we've all learnt so much over the last couple of years. And to answer your question, David, I think the number one challenge that we're all faced with at the moment, and one that we're studying every day at Couriers Please, is just the change in buyer behaviours and customer expectations. So what I mean by that is that for the last 10 or 20 years, we've had a well understood seasonality, as we've seen parcel volumes and online shopping, for example, build right up to Christmas. In the last 5 or 6 years, we've seen a big spike in November with sales like Black Friday and Cyber Monday. To some extent, all of that's gone out the window in the last couple of years with COVID. So the biggest challenge has been dealing with those COVID volumes. In the one sense, it's made certain aspects of life a little bit easier with more and more people being home. But again, we're seeing that change again now. So it's the challenge. I think the number one challenge for us is understanding how we deal with those fluctuations in volume. That's been a challenge that we've had for some years, but how we can be smarter about understanding what customers are going to want going forward. Give you a couple of specific examples that I'm sure will come up in our discussion today. One is things like pet food and the sheer number of pets people have purchased through COVID. Is that a product that people necessarily want to go into a shop, a physical retail store and buy? Probably not. But it's also not necessarily something that you would buy at the last minute. So these are what we're seeing become subscription purchases. So this rise of the subscription economy, whether it's alcohol deliveries, whether it's pet food, or many of the other things that people are buying around the home. What we're hearing from customers is that they're happy to buy those on a subscription basis. They don't necessarily want to go to the shops and carry them home. What customers are also telling us is, like all of us, after a couple of years of lockdown, they want to get out of their house and they want to go back into retail stores, but they don't necessarily always need to buy. So we're seeing a lot of browsing going on in retail stores, and let's face it, retailers are spending a lot of money on floor space still, but they want the opportunity to go and buy. When they understand their size and they've had a really good experience, then we know that they're going to do that again and again. But I guess the number one frustration is, that when things don't go right. And that's where, to your earlier point in your agenda today about technology, I think the challenge for us is to start to use the technology and the data that's available in a really meaningful way going forward. So again, I'll start, I guess, our conversation with challenging some of the things that we used to do in this industry, like dropping physical calling cards and asking a customer to go and do something. I think there's an expectation now when all of that information is available digitally, and certainly as we've seen from recent experiences, it needs to be stored correctly, and we need to give customers assurance that we have the right cyber security and systems in place. But I think customers by and large have an expectation that we'll proactively use that data to make their life as a consumer a lot easier. And my personal view is that companies that can do that and show a degree of flexibility are going to be rewarded. So what we're also seeing is customers say, show me what the different levels of service are. I don't think any of us as industry participants are going to do well in the future by trying to reduce our costs by slowing down our service or reducing our offering. I think customers are going to continue to want things faster and provided on a more convenient basis. So getting a head around some of those things is certainly, to me, one of the #1 challenges coming out of COVID.
Great. There's a lot in there, Richard, and I suppose I wanted to ask Chris the same question, but Chris, I wouldn't mind if you could actually, insert some perspective on some of the points that Richard raised there as well. So from shippers' point of view, we know you're becoming more and more important in the market in Australia, especially. What do you think are the major issues around home delivery at the moment?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, David. I suppose from our side, what we've seen is like a significant increase in consumer expectations. So I think the rise of Uber, Deliveroo, those sort of experiences where people are seeing their takeaway get tracked from restaurant to the door, they expect to see that through their parcel delivery. And what we certainly see is that any sort of poor delivery experience really sort of goes back to the online retailer that sold that product. So it tends to be a consumer straight onto a Google review and giving some bad feedback. I think to Richard's point, we've gone through a couple of years of quite significant change. People are returning back to the office now. The sort of experience of being able to leave things outside the door is probably not kind of the safest approach anymore, and every sort of failed delivery impacts that consumer experience. So I think from our side, David, it really is about improving that delivery experience, and that's been proven to increase sort of basket conversions and then repeat purchase with retailers, and every poor experience can really harm that.
Got it. Understand. I think I'm going to follow on to that question with Marie. Marie, you're the head of shipping for the largest marketplace in Australia, and I'm interested from your perspective, looking at it from the consumer point of view in terms of service levels. And now, and especially since COVID, what do you think have been the major changes in people's service level expectations?
Yeah, there's been a few things that changed during COVID. We've seen, for example, the need or at least preference for contactless delivery. So as such, a lot of retailers dropped, or like carriers really, dropped their signature on delivery offer. Some of them only have very recently reinstated that. And that's a bit of a problem when it comes to, deliveries of really high value items, because both seller and buyer do appreciate a peace of mind that comes with the extra insurance and just knowing when your item is received and by whom. Another thing that we've seen was Saturday and Sunday deliveries really coming into play. That's something that in the Australian market, I've grown up in Germany. Saturday deliveries have been a thing ever since I remember. I have no idea why Australia is so behind there in that regard. We've seen it pick up during COVID, and now it's used on occasions to deal with, backlog. But it's really hard to manage customer expectations around that now, because they happen sometimes, but they don't happen always. So yeah, some of the challenges here.
Good. So Richard, I'm not ganging up on you, but I've got to give you the opportunity to respond to some of that commentary around service levels post-COVID and what Marie's just said. So any thoughts?
Yeah, I think Marie makes some really good points. Is that That's the reality of the market that we operate in today. So I think number one, we've got to take some of the learnings from other markets around the world, and there are differences. I mean, we've got vast differences that we need to cover here in Australia in a much smaller population, and as a result, there's a cost of doing business here that's quite different to doing business in Europe, for example, or even the US for that matter. So my comment around that is that we can do all of those things. We can deliver on Saturday, we can deliver on Sunday. You know, we can stand on one leg and deliver. We can sing people happy birthday if we want, if that's what they want us to do. But we can't do that for the same price as we can drop a parcel at the door. And I'm not trying to be cute. That's just the reality, because I always encourage people to imagine one of their family members out there undertaking those deliveries in the rain, in the floods over the next couple of months. We need to pay people properly. Just like retailers need to pay people in their stores correctly, it's really important that we pay people properly and that we do things legally and we do things sustainably in this country. Because if we're just trying to do things as cheaply as possible, yeah, you can do that, but you can't do them properly that way in the long term. And also you can't do them at scale. So if I'm buying from a big retailer and I want to live virtually anywhere in Australia, I want to make sure, and the retail customers that we talk to tell us they want that level of consistency right across the country. Otherwise, it's not a great experience. And fundamentally, the service that we're providing is an extension of their brand. 50 years ago, if you got something delivered from a retailer, it would have been an employee of the retailer in a van. What we're trying to do is emulate that model in a much more modern environment and use a cohesive technology platform to connect us. And that's what businesses like Ship It are helping us do, basically. So I guess to the point about, you know, should we have a broader range of offerings? Absolutely, no question. I agree with Marie 100%. I think what we've got to do is be smarter about how we commercialize that and then how we communicate that to a customer. So to use the point about an iPhone delivery, a high value item delivery, I should say, absolutely agree. That's something that should attract a higher price point, a higher service level, and a level of security that gives everybody, seller, receiver, the comfort that it's going to be done properly. Should we track an iPhone, you know, delivery the same way that we track a pizza? Probably not. Or, you know, there's a security aspect that we need to consider around that as well. And that's where I think, you know, we all need to collaborate as an industry and be much smarter about how we provide those services. But it has to be done at the right price as well to be sustainable in the long term.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Because we're about halfway through this amazing conversation, and I wanted to remind audience members that if you do have a question, you can pop that in the question box, which should be to your right, and we'll attempt to get to it at the end of the presentation. There is a lot to get through, so I'll let you get back to it, David.
Great, thank you. Well, my next question is to Matt, actually, and it really is, I just want to get a perspective on a piece of research that we did. We did a survey recently, and we found that of the people who actually, book something and ask for same-day delivery, only 29% of them actually want same-day delivery. And most of them are booking same-day delivery as a guarantee for a particular level of service. And as you think about your retail customer base, I wouldn't mind a perspective from you on how that impacts your business.
Yeah, thanks for having me here today, guys. I appreciate it. I think from a service level, in that sense, customers, I think they always just default to whatever the fastest option is going to be, and they don't necessarily all the time understand the complexities of fulfilling that in such a format. I think what we see, you know, at the end of the day, I think what it comes down to is we're going to have to tailor our solutions and just basically be a bit more creative with how we're actually delivering to the end customer. However, you know, we do probably about 95% of our business is wrapped up in a domestic express standpoint on a next day service, and we get a lot of amazing feedback from that. I think the same day deliveries work better for the commodities, for your alcohols and groceries and things that you actually need sort of in real time. I think everything else can definitely default into a next day service comfortably, which definitely falls into the right price point and offering to the customer. And I think, you know, back to what Richard was saying a moment ago, I think the next day service for things like apparel and beauty care products and all that kind of stuff, I think is definitely the most sustainable and most cost-effective options. However, yeah, we do have to get creative with how we basically cater to the market to make sure that we are providing the service level that they do expect.
Sorry, got it. And Chris, have you got a perspective on that you wouldn't mind sharing?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, David. I think what we see on this is it's really about customers wanting their expectations met. Across all of our data that we see, there's a significant spike in sort of contacts to service centres and the like as soon as a parcel goes out of the expected delivery window, and that's where kind of a lot of noise comes from. I think from our kind of experience, it's really sort of when and how you set these expectations, and expectations are often set in the e-commerce checkout, and depending on services that people are using, that can vary from quoting a delivery date of 3 days time through to 10 days time, and as a result consumers lose, I suppose, trust in what they're actually buying there. So yeah, we see the same sort of the same reaction that you're seeing through the research, David, of people then reverting to same day or next day product, where because they're guaranteed that that's going to come. So for us, it's not necessarily that consumers want everything same day or next day. It's more that they want their expectations met. And I think to Richard's earlier point right at the start around sort of pet food delivery, if I'm ordering that and I'm ordering for 30 days time, I'm more than happy that it comes. But again, it's just sort of expectation setting and giving consumers the choice that they're after at checkout.
Can I add something there, David, to Chris's point? I think a really important trend that we're seeing now with so many people kind of changing their lifestyle habits and working arrangements is that if I need something next Tuesday, I may not actually need it tomorrow. It may be more important to me that it gets delivered when, and to Marie's point about it being a high value item, it may be more important that I get it on Tuesday, and that may be in 5 days' time. So I think what we've not been good at in our industry historically is catering for that day definite delivery. And we see a lot of this overseas, where some of the learnings from there are that it's more important for me to get it the day that we agreed that I needed it than it to be same day, next day. Sometimes get a little bit carried away with that, I think, too.
Well, that leads into a question that I actually wanted to throw to the group, and maybe I'll start with this. As we think about convenience and the growth of sort of out-of-home delivery, does the panel think that there's going to be a rising demand for these services? I mean, we talked about same day, next day, we're talking about home delivery, but what about alternatives to home delivery, which is very important to me? And I wouldn't mind throwing this at Marie first, actually, and just get a point on that, and then sharing some feedback on this from some of the other members of the panel.
Sure. I need to take the opportunity to just add on top of what everyone said. We're seeing the exact same thing when it comes to managing customer expectations. Like, I love the fact that everyone said this, because as well, internal as well as external research, 100% customers value accuracy over speed. And it's probably the biggest challenge that we at eBay face, like really getting that right. Alternative delivery options. So look, I think at the moment, basically, when it comes to delivery options, there's only really two variables here in play. There is speed, and then there is location. So with speed, we always say to all our sellers, offer the customer options, whether or not they have, a same next day, or at least an express of some sort, or a standard option that usually comes, at like a cheaper price. And then location is something that we tend to enable for the seller. So we say you can choose to get this delivered to your home or work if possible, or you get it delivered, to a hub location where you can pick it up at your own convenience. So these are really the only variables that we're playing with at the moment. I personally love the sustainability angle that's coming in, where that is becoming like the third variable in the equation as to what we choose today. And I think there's a lot happening in that space. So.
Thanks, Marie. I might ask the same question to Matt as well, just as you think about from your retailer's perspective, but other delivery choices and then taking into account out of home. Just what's your point of view on that?
Yeah, I think there's a big focus on it at the moment. The sustainability point is something that we as a global business are taking a lot of or putting a lot of energy into at the moment for many reasons, and we see this as a great option to support that. I think what we see with our customers is that a lot of the customers, the end customers that is, they always want whatever's going to be just simply most convenient to them. And that's generally having that product delivered to them in their hands, and they go out and use it or do whatever they're going to do with it. However, we're seeing a big growing need from all of our retailers around a backup option. So for security, but also for convenience. We're seeing a lot of customers, utilize the failed delivery solutions that we use through the PUDO networks, like hubs. With that, there's a big growth in that as well, because as people are going back to the office, or they have these subscription models set up where we are sending things to their houses and they're not home anymore. They're looking for a different solution, so knowing that their product's going to be safe and stored somewhere that's conveniently accessible for them. So there's definitely a growing demand for it. I think there's a lot of requirement for it, and I think, in my view, my personal view, is that it's something that we should be pushing a lot more. I think it keeps more trucks off the road. I think it creates just a little bit of a improved economic solution as well, and that's something that we really value on our side.
Marie and Chris, why are there so many ways to pay online and so few delivery options typically? And I'm not talking about your specific marketplaces or your services, because I know you add them, but generally when you look at the sort of e-com landscape, why are there so many ways to pay and so few ways to deliver?
I don't mind going first on that one, Marie. I think kind of ultimately it's quite difficult because any delivery involves a physical process. There's a physical good that has to move through quite a few different parties, and the data transfer and all of that needs to go right to get a good experience. We're probably dealing with sort of e-com coming from nowhere to now being a pretty sort of substantial part of deliveries over a 10-year period. That sort of challenged networks and existing ways of looking at delivery. And I think there's probably just, and Richard could probably talk to this as well, there's probably just the sort of physical constraints of how many vehicles are actually on the road and how competitive it is to get drivers in those vehicles. So I think it's really just a mix that it is a difficult process. There's a lot of stakeholders involved in a successful delivery, and we certainly believe technology's got a huge role to play in improving that data transfer between all the parties and making that more efficient.
Well, I think that answer sort of leads in. I agree, by the way, and I think that answer leads into the next question, which I'll actually throw at both Richard and Matt, and it really is about security and the fact that authority to leave is growing again in usage, especially since COVID. And Marie did touch on some of these issues around security and higher value items. So I really want to know from your perspectives what you think is changing, or what are the things that need to improve to satisfy people's concerns around security, and what you're doing within your own organizations.
Who would you like to go first? Yeah, I think security is always an ongoing issue, but I don't think that's where the real gains to be made are. I think there are some common sense things that we can do from a security point of view. If I was a cynical person, I'd suggest this is a question designed by a PUDO network operator, because I think this is where networks like Hub can really come into play. But I think the important thing to note here is that a well-organized network with the right technology provides a good level of security. But if I go to everything we've said about what customers want, and fundamentally, I think the biggest single learning through COVID is that as Australians, we've demonstrated, and people have made it clear, we don't like being told what to do. We hated being told that we had to lock down. We went along with it because we had no choice, but fundamentally, we want more choices. So as a consumer, if I can be provided with the choice of having it delivered at home, even if I know that I need to stay at home away, or the opportunity to pick something up on the way home to work, from work, or have something delivered closer to work, then that's ideal. And that's to me where the new battleground needs to be. How do we sensibly provide choices without disrupting the delivery experience, but at the same time make it reliable? And if we can partner together, and I think that's where technology should make it easier. So I should be able, as a retailer, to be using the Ship It platform, should be able to count on the fact that it's reliably integrated with Couriers Please, should be able to, which in turn needs to be integrated with hubs, so that whether it's being delivered by one of my courier franchisees or handed over a counter in a hub location, it should be the same end-to-end transaction. I think in this day and age, where we'll let ourselves down as an industry if we're not able to make that a seamless end-to-end transaction. As a consumer, I don't want to be told every step of the way that somebody else is accountable. I want to know that whoever I bought that service off is able to guarantee me that service has been completed. And if there is a problem, let me know in advance and let me know who to contact to do something about it.
I think, sorry to interrupt that, because I'm actually, we're literally running out of time, and I'm now realizing that we most probably need a Mark II version of this discussion, because there's so much more to do. So I'm actually going to skip the conversation around technology, and I'm going to jump straight to sustainability and ask all of you for a perspective on this. Now, according to some research done by the Carbon Reduction Institute of Australia, shipping to collection points reduce CO2 emissions and congestion by about 50% on a home delivery, right? And we know that consumers believe that sustainability is important, but the research also says that they're not actually prepared to pay for it. So the question I'd ask you all is, do you think a sustainable shipping solution is important? And what are your thoughts about driving adoption of these alternate, delivery solutions to support sustainability? I might start with you, Maria, if that's okay.
Yeah, I'd love to start. So look, I think it's no surprise that people may not be willing to pay extra for it, given the times we're in. We've seen inflation and cost of living rise at like rapid speeds, but we definitely know that there's a preference, and when it comes to choice, all other things being equal, there's definitely a strong preference for a more sustainable option. So I think a really great starting point would just giving customer more visibility into this. So to give you an example, I purchased something last week, and I'm basically qualified for free express delivery. The item was coming from Melbourne. I'm based in Sydney, so naturally, like, why wouldn't I choose express, right? I get it faster. It's a bit of a no-brainer. Now, however, if someone now was to tell me, okay, your express delivery is coming via plane, and the carbon footprint on this is much bigger than the road delivery that comes 2 days later, if there's no time sensitivity here for me, then maybe, I do actually choose the slower version, the slower option to reduce my personal kind of carbon footprint in this equation. So I think just starting with that visibility would already be a bit of a game changer in the industry, and actually something I think is relatively easy to do. So I think that's where we should be heading.
Perfect. Chris?
Yeah, and I completely sort of echo what Marie said there. I suppose as Ship It, one of our sort of key missions is to reduce waste in e-commerce delivery, and I suppose we see the last mile to the door as one of the most inefficient parts of the process. I think there's been a number of studies, the one you pointed to, David. I think Accenture have also done one specifically focused on Sydney, where it's looked at how much sort of carbon footprint could be removed with the use of micro fulfillment or sort of not to the door delivery. And I think we're starting to see those trends coming from the leading retailers around their sort of ESG commitments. And I completely second what Marie has said there around needing to provide more visibility over what the carbon impact is. We here at Ship It offset any deliveries and sort of offset the carbon, but I think there's a future where we can literally get to carbon zero deliveries if everyone cooperates in the right way, and we can get these sort of local hubs working, and really, I suppose, educate consumers that by making a meaningful choice to walk down the road to pick up their item, it's saving a lot of carbon emissions.
Great. And Matt, do you have a quick point on this?
Yeah, I do. I think there's a couple of things I just wanted to say quickly. I'd say one, and I don't think it's necessarily just the final mile piece that is really bad at the moment. I think it really stems back. Seco traditionally the freight forwarder. We see freight, sent over to us through airlines, through shipping containers, and so on. And the amount of CO2 that we're putting out across all those trade lanes and all those verticals is also contributing to the whole thing. I think Marie's point earlier around visibility is definitely a key driver here. If people understand exactly the benefits that are being gained out of going down a more sustainable path instead of just sort of greenwashing, so to speak, I think that's going to be something that's truly going to move the needle. But the main thing that I think is going to move the needle is around incentives. We need to find smarter ways to incentivize retailers and governments to incentivize cleaner deliveries, cleaner distribution, and really improve the supply chain overall. So there's some things that I personally really believe in. I think we really need to do. I think to everybody's point today, we need a collective approach though. I think if we're sort of from a competitive perspective, offering, let's say, cheaper rates for a dirtier solution or something like that, it doesn't really help the overall supply chain, and it's something that we need to take responsibility for as leaders of all of our businesses.
Richard, you're at the coalface, excuse the pun. So what's your perspective?
Yeah, we're absolutely wanting to move away from a coal-powered future, Dave. But we're certainly it's rare. Let's face it. On a panel like this, we would get an eclectic group of industry participants to so vehemently agree on one particular topic, and I agree with everything that's been said by the other panelists today. And I think I can sum up our position by saying that knowledge is power here. We need to be able to honestly and accurately work together to measure our carbon footprint. And I think that the challenge that I'd like to put out there is that we take an industry view on these things. So we're not developing our own currencies. We don't want this to be like the rail gauge in Australia was many, many years ago. I think there's a real opportunity to be a bit smarter about that, because if we can give consumers ultimately the right information and then they can make an informed choice, then I think not only are we going to be better off for it, but the future generations will be better off for it. And we see it at Couriers Please as a key to attracting franchise partners the right type. We want people that are interested in how we can support and how we can do the right thing, not only for the environment, but for the people in our business and for our customers to really kind of want to come and join and be part of the journey. So I think it's an industry challenge, but I think it represents a fantastic opportunity. And as Matt said, there's a role for us to play in lobbying and working with government on this as well, so that we do have a coherent and well understood message that we can go to customers with.
Couldn't agree more. And I agree with the sentiments that everybody had on that topic, actually. And I suppose, Natasha, at this point, I'll hand back over to you.
Excellent. Yeah, there's so much to get through, and we do have a lot of audience questions as well. So apologies in advance if we don't get through everyone's questions. There were many, and this has been a really interesting topic. So I'll start out by jumping into the first one. Do you see a cost differential between delivery to collection point and home? Who wants to jump in for that one?
Well, I will. There are consolidation benefits that the carriers can benefit from by dropping a consolidated number of consignments into a single location. It's just simple math. If you can drop 20 items into a PUDO point rather than doing 20 individual deliveries. There's a cost saving there. The question is whether that actually gets passed on in the appropriate ways, you know, across the purchase experience. But we've certainly started to engage with customers, or you know, retailers and carriers who are starting to see that difference. You're also seeing in the UK now, for example, Zara. If you go to if you pick up click and collect item with Zara in the UK, it's a different price to home delivery, and we're starting to see that more and more throughout Europe. And we have a couple of customers who are literally going to be trialing that with us in the next few months. So we personally think that it's a trend that's going to continue.
Yeah, and I can address that from a carrier's perspective, not dissimilar to your approach there, David. It's really simple that if we can work with both customers and partners like Hub to get a cost saving and an efficiency within our business, then we should pass that on, because we want to ultimately not just focus on price. We want to provide the best value service that we can for customers. And if we go back to everything we said earlier today about differentiating between service levels, then I think it's really important that we can do that.
Great answers. I've got another question here. Have retailers and brands kept up with the investment in logistics to support delivery efficiencies? If not, where do they need to focus efforts? And if so, what have been the better logistics improvements?
I can take that probably from our perspective. Like I think sort of retailers in general are looking for ways to get better control over their delivery experience. As I probably sort of said right at the start, it tends to be the brand that cops the bad feedback from a negative delivery experience. You know, I don't want to do a sort of sales pitch for Ship It, but I think through solutions like ours and putting that sort of branded tracking across the experience and giving access to different all different sets of carriers and data that can show which last mile provider is performing better in certain lanes and certain routes helps retailers get a bit more sort of handle on their last mile delivery process. But fundamentally, I think you know, more investment needs to go into the logistics sector across the board, and I think to Richard's point, that needs to be a collaborative effort across all the participants in the industry, including government.
Great answer.
I'd echo what Chris just said. I think from our perspective too, we've noticed that customers basically want more choices. They're investing more time and effort in understanding supply chain, whereas previously, you know, they would just sort of look at a single carrier, for example, or a single partner to work with and hope that the partner does the best for them. Whereas now, you know, we see a massive uptake in multi-carrier solutions. We see a massive uptake in having, different delivery options like PUDO, like door to door and things like that. So there's definitely, I think the market is becoming much better educated, and I think they're putting a bit more pressure on us as the suppliers to continue to innovate and do more. So there's definitely a lot more we can do. I think we just need to take that collaborative approach and figure out the right way forward.
I've got another question here. Through the pandemic and now out of the pandemic, was there a change in the demand for out-of-home delivery? Has it increased to the same level it was pre-pandemic? Assuming it has increased in that question, but who wants to talk to that one?
Well, again, I'll start on that. You know, I meet so many people who say to me, oh, you know, COVID must have been great for your business. And I say, no, it wasn't. Everyone was at home. So there wasn't as much need for our service. But what we have seen is two things. The level of demand for our service has increased post the pandemic. I think partly because a lot of the retailers, 3PLs and the carriers are starting to look at more efficient ways of providing that last mile delivery service. So the demand has been coming from them. And I think there's been more visibility for consumers to understand that those services are available. So I do think that that's growing now. Australia is still, less than 5%, I think, of all volume goes through out of home. But if you look at Europe, in some markets, it's 40, 50, 60%. And growing. So we expect the trend to continue on that trajectory in the coming years.
And I think to your point, Dave, that's absolutely true from a carrier's perspective. I think people got to know their local courier or their local postie during COVID and came up with all kinds of interesting contactless arrangements. But I suspect there'll be a lot of families that will take a break this Christmas and probably haven't settled on what life's going to look like in 2023 yet, around their working arrangements, when they're going to be home. So we're gearing up for, and we expect, a surge in our activity, and I suspect, David, you're gearing up for that with Hubbed, and particularly when it comes to things like returns, which we haven't really touched on today. I think that's the other thing that we're definitely hearing from both senders and receivers, which is we're looking for more innovative return solutions, because even though online sales are tapering off a little bit as people go back into retail stores, all of the evidence certainly suggests that they're settling back to levels that are well and truly above where they were pre-COVID.
Yeah, I'd probably follow on from sort of Richard's point there. I think we saw sort of over our data that sort of retail online spend as a percentage of retail kind of reached about 22% in peak COVID. We're sort of back to about sort of 17-18% at the moment, but the trend line is to continue, and we'll probably be back to those sort of COVID levels of spend in a couple of years' time based on the trend line. And I suppose we're sort of firm believers that e-commerce is going to continue to grow, and more percentage of transactions will be conducted online. And without being able to put double the amount of trucks on the road, there's always going to be constraints, and having networks that can receive goods and you can pop in when convenient for use, I think, going to become more and more important over the next few years.
And the other big trend, I guess, that we've not talked about so far is the incredible rise in side hustles and small businesses people started from home. Not always practical in those startup businesses to have somebody come and pick up every day or to schedule that. So again, I think we're going to see the rise in the. I don't think the side hustle trend is going to stop, but I think it makes a lot of sense to take advantage of those consolidation benefits that you mentioned earlier for those businesses. So if I'm doing a bit of work at home and I'm creating something and I'm in a creative industry and I can drop it off at a secure, reliable PUDO point and get it into a network that way, that gives me an alternative. Australia Post does a great job, but it gives me an alternative to a post office that doesn't have the most flexible hours, and that's what customers are telling us they're looking for, is flexibility and reliability. Then I think that's a trend that we're going to continue to see right around the country.
Yeah.
I've got a question. I actually got two questions about sustainability, and they sort of contradict each other, which is why I think it's interesting to discuss. So one question is, what else could you do to promote sustainable shipping? But then the other question is, with respect to sustainability and, the other one, the balance between sustainability and customer expectations is hard to achieve. What are the risks of businesses pandering to customer expectations? So I think they both show that there's those two flip sides of what's driving sustainability. Is it customer expectations? Is it just doing the right thing as a business? And how do you balance all those different pressures?
I guess some of it really, and I'm repeating myself there, but is giving people more insight and visibility into what's happening today and what carbon footprint the deliveries have, and that usually a faster delivery comes at the expense of a bigger carbon footprint, right? So we don't do this today. There's platforms like ourselves that we would have to still surface that information. But we could do this relatively easily, and I do think it would influence choice for sure.
Yeah, and I think on that, we're at the very beginning of a decarbonisation journey in our industry. Is the reality. I would love to be able to wave a magic wand and electrify our fleet. Not only are there issues around range, but there's issues around availability. And these are so I think there's short-term, medium, and long-term things that we can be doing. and measurement and understanding what the choices are clearly fall into that short-term bucket. And then working with government as an industry on policy, and then working with vehicle manufacturers, medium and longer term things that we need to be doing. But if we don't start them now, we're never going to get there. And we've seen that in other markets. We're owned by Singapore Post, who've got a very, very aggressive and forward focused approach to sustainability. And with good government policy and with access to electric vehicles, we've been able to make fantastic inroads there. So despite the challenges in Australia, we think that we're right at the start of that journey realistically now.
I think both of those questions are very valid, and I think part of the challenges as an industry, we're not tying two things together in support of the points that have just been made before. At the end of the day, the more deliveries that occur, the more congestion and/or carbon emissions that there are going to be. The more you use other delivery options, the more consolidation and efficiency there is. And therefore, these two things just aren't, in my view, being married up together. And we as an industry aren't bringing those two things together. There are ways for us to provide more sustainable solutions that actually reduce CO2, reduce congestion, and actually also drive efficiency within the last mile. But as an industry, to the points Richard was making, Marie, Chris, everybody, we need to sort of sit down and say, how are we going to handle this together in a more unified way so that people can see benefits on both sides.
We are over time. I wanted to thank everybody so much for coming today, our fantastic panelists. There was obviously a lot to get through, and we did miss some information about tech, and there were so many questions we couldn't get through. So I do encourage everyone to reach out with their questions, connect via LinkedIn, or you probably have some email addresses. Definitely reach out. It's obviously a really important topic and there's a lot to cover. Thank you everyone for coming today. This webinar has been recorded, so you will be able to view it at a later date if you'd like. Thank you again for coming, and we'll see you next time. Thank you all.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks everybody. Have a good day.
Oh.